It's a really great time to be looking at how academics, administrators, and senior leaders are all shifting their focus to long-term change as part of powering universities beyond the pandemic. Ishan has a presentation for us today that outlines how Inspira has been partnering with university clients during this period. So, Ishan, I'd like to hand over to you, and if you can take it away, please.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this session. My name is Ishan Kolhatkar from Inspira, as Alistair has introduced me. And I'm going to talk to you briefly this morning about how you can empower change in higher education and beyond, beyond the pandemic, and how digital assessment is something that you can make part of the armory that you have within your institution to deliver really high quality assessments to your students. The same high quality assessments you've already written, but in that digital context. So what are we going to look at today? I want to look at a number of features. I'm not going to dwell on this slide that's just a menu, but start really with who we are and what we do and really what a digital assessment platform is. Because while sort of pre-pandemic, digital assessment was adopted to different levels, perhaps by different institutions, there was something of a feeling that digital assessment was something that would one day be the thing that comes, be the thing that we actually do and will work towards, but perhaps not what we're going to do today, because there's lots of other things that we wanted to do first. The pandemic has probably shifted that debate slightly in that during the course of the pandemic, everyone had to pivot very quickly to doing assessments in a digital format because of the issues that they faced with their students not being on site. So what do? We are an assessment platform that allows you to use your entire assessment cycle within the platform itself so that you can plan your assessments, design them, and that includes innovating them to include and harness the power of digital assessment, to deliver them with a great student experience, to mark them, and then to share that feedback, the feedback appropriate to the type of assessment that you have just run. So it is a place to do all of that, rather than doing it partly on paper or relying on other tools like email or sharing documents in a particular way, or importantly, not using your VLE, because your VLE was designed for learning. That's where your students go. Whereas an assessment platform is designed for assessment, and you're not placing a great strain on your VLE rather than doing it in a dedicated space, in the same way that you use a VLE rather than just perhaps giving your students access to Dropbox and a collection of documents. It's about putting it in that right place. So why make this journey to digital assessment? As I say, although people during the pandemic have been really very much forced to do this because of the situation they face, as we hopefully come out of that and come closer to what looked like the norm prior to the pandemic, you may be asking yourself, well, do I need to do this? Pre-pandemic, I wasn't thinking about it, or it was on a longer term plan. Why do I need it now? There are some, perhaps, I think, clear reasons to do it. First of all, being that we may not know what we face in terms of the challenges of educating and assessing students over the next 3, 4, 5 years, or perhaps beyond. But the second is because you can innovate in this space by doing things that you wouldn't do on paper with paper and pen, or couldn't do with paper and pen. Now, I'm a great believer that when we say to people, let's be innovative, it's firstly a lot of pressure just to say to someone, innovate. Because how? What? What would you want me to do? What can I do? I think the best way to drive innovation is to put the various stakeholders, as well as the various people with great knowledge, in the same space, in the same room, real or virtual, and they can innovate together. Use your learning and teaching specialists, your subject matter experts, and those who know about assessment in particular, along with people who know about technology. Between them, what they will create is more innovative assessments. I'm going to give you some examples based on what we've discussed with our customers, but also from my own knowledge as someone who, prior to working in digital assessment, implemented Inspira, and prior to that was a lecturer in law, specifically training people to be barristers because I was a barrister before that. Here are some of the things that you can do, but to really drive that innovation, it's about contextualizing them in your own context and in your own institution. Collaboration, then. I know that there'll be people listening thinking, well, we did have to pivot to digital assessment. We did it quite quickly. And we're concerned maybe that we had to use what were traditional closed book exams and deliver them in a far more open format. And that didn't work because people may have collaborated when they shouldn't. And while I still think the incidence of that happening is relatively low, and that we collectively made the right decision over the last year to still allow people to progress by assessing them. The fact is that collaboration really describes what we do in the world beyond our education. We all work together. As I look at the top of this screen to see how this webinar is being produced, there are people behind the scenes that you won't get to see who work incredibly hard because we do very little in our lives solo. There are some things that we have to know, of course, but you can create collaborative assessments where you actually mark some of that collaboration. And if it's something that's not suitable to be wholly collaborative, you can think about an assessment in two parts where perhaps you have a group of students who collaborate together to produce some research, and then they have more individual questions, something perhaps more reflective that they produce by themselves, something that is inherently not the sort of thing that you collaborate on, that you have to write by yourself. Oral exams. I know from someone who taught on a program which had baked into it a number of oral exams. As you might imagine, teaching someone to be a lawyer, you do oral exams to check their skills. But even beyond that, I know that any academic watching today has had the same experience as me of reading a script and thinking, if only I could ask you a couple of questions just so that I understand whether you really understand. And with a well crafted oral assessment, you can do that because you have that flexibility to talk to the candidate and to get out a little bit more about what they know. Now, you may say, well, what's that got to do with digital? Well, like collaboration, where you can do that collaboration and store it digitally and know what they're using, and perhaps if you want to restrict it to what they're using, just being that, with an oral exam, you have the ability to do it remotely or on site and record it and do it within a platform so that you have your recording and your marking in one place. It also means that while I'm the first to accept that there are issues in realizing people's own sensitivities to using their webcam at home, you will have students who will welcome this and would want to do this. I said recently on a different webinar that I would much prefer to do a number of my assessments. Thankfully, I don't have any to do at home wearing my pajamas. I assure you I'm not wearing them today, although you'll never know because you can only see my shirt and jumper. I could well be wearing my favorite reindeer pajamas. We'll never know. But there are some people for whom this is a benefit because they would prefer that environment. I am not someone who ever performed well, whether I look at it then or now, in a room where it was just me or several people in silence. That didn't work for me. So oral exams, digital tools allow you to do this in so many different ways. Reflection. I mentioned this earlier with the collaboration, but allowing people to write reflectively over a period of time, storing those artifacts in a single place rather than it being in a mishmash of places, but in a platform where they know eventually that's it, that's where all of their reflection goes. It can be marked digitally. That's another way that digital assessment can help you drive towards those enhancements that you may well have been thinking about well before digital tools, but they just help you get there by easing the process of writing reflection and it being stored and your students being able to do it. If you are thinking about using exams you've already got, for example, if you've got multiple choice questions, what a digital assessment platform lets you do is have question banks. It allows you to do what, for example, the Royal Colleges do in the United Kingdom with their final exams for doctors, and have large question banks where you've got equally weighted questions, but you know then that you can deliver to your candidates a random sample, a random selection of those questions, so that if your concern is people collaborating as they should in a way they should not, or doing it from home, that you don't necessarily have to proctor them. You've got other ways of ensuring that the person doing the exam, it's just them, they're not working with others. You may have to use these things together, but those question banks allow you to do that. In a formative context, what they allow you to do is put up all your formative questions if you want, and deliver a random selection to your students so that they can practice doing these questions in a way that doesn't require you to create tens, maybe even hundreds of practice papers that then need to be printed and downloaded, or downloaded and then printed by students. So there's a saving there in terms of what people are doing. It's interactive. You can get the system to pull a random sample for you, and the system's taking the strain, not you. And then finally, there is just open book. There is the ability to say where it's appropriate, let's make our assessments closer to sort of real world tasks. Uh, in the world beyond being in an institution, a student will often have to create a presentation or write a document in Word or create a spreadsheet, or perhaps all three put together. Well, a digital assessment platform will let you do that, either in a wholly open book format where they can use these tools and then upload them, or as we have the ability to restrict it so that they can only use Excel in the context you want them to, and not the rest of the internet or contact others. So this is all well and good. You may say these are innovations I'd love to do. How am I actually going to get there? How am I going to get to the point of being able to have a digital assessment platform and use it across my institution, perhaps starting a bit smaller, but ultimately, that's my aim. The first step is to understand your students. I think the student experience is so wholly important to making this work and students feeling comfortable. I'll talk in a moment about what we've seen from our customers, but what you, I would suggest, need to do is understand them as you already do in the context of what you do now, but understand how they work digitally. There is, of course, the probably debunked assumption by now that students are young and use technology all the time. Therefore, if I put anything in front of them, it will work. That may not necessarily be the case. One of the reasons why our platform is web-based is that we take the view that lots of people use websites. It's a common denominator here. And so rather than looking around an unfamiliar screen, something that looks like a web page is going to engage with students. They're going to find it easier to use. But wider than that, I think it's worth finding out what they might like to do digitally, what they might have queries or questions about doing digitally. And as much as anything else, getting them as part of this dialogue to understand whether you are going to be digitizing what you've got now, or whether you're going to be changing your assessment formats greatly by digitizing, because that's the kind of concern that they may have. I think the second part is understanding your institution, understanding what capabilities you have. Are you an institution where you could, over a period of 6 to 12 months, roll this out completely everywhere? Do you have the sort of institution where you have all of those stakeholders I mentioned before, faculty, administrators, people with technical knowledge, people with subject matter knowledge, learning technologists, learning and teaching specialists? Are they able to implement a system where you'd essentially have a menu of assessments that say, here's what we can do digitally, here's how perhaps it maps to what you've done before, and here are the new things? If you've got that, I'd suggest that you can, over a period of 6 to 12 months, implement an entire solution across your institution. If, however, you don't quite have that configured the way you want, then I think you need to understand that you might want to start with a particular faculty or a particular school and move from there and gradually adopt. Understand your requirements. I think it's all too easy to say, I want everything. I want buying a new platform, so I want it to do everything I could possibly think of. And what starts as a list of functional requirements actually just becomes a huge wish list of everyone's desires. I might want it to do this small thing perhaps somewhere. that is going to get in the way of both you procuring a system, but also you implementing it because you're going to try and do so much in one go. I think even if you do have a long list of requirements, being able to sensibly filter them into absolute musts, highly desirable, and desirable, if we get there, will help you select the right partner to work with. Certainly helps us in partnering with people. And it means that you're going to implement more of this rather than having bits of a system that you never use or never get to. Step 4 is piloting. I think that even if you do have the right configuration where you could roll this out really quickly, some piloting really does help, just to help you with the things that you wouldn't have thought about or didn't think about, as you'll discover during a pilot, and being able to work with your partner to be able to get that best use out of the system. And then step 5, continuous improvement. Again, slightly related to my earlier point, which was trying not to do everything in one go. Having your own roadmap is important. What might you want to get to in 3 or 4 years' time? Are you going to start slow and just digitize your paper? Or are you going to be a little bit more ambitious? And what's that going to look like? Both you as an institution and also your assessment provider, your platform, working in partnership so that you both understand your respective roadmaps and where they tie up and where you may need to discuss it. That is crucial to this being more than just digitizing a paper and actually driving innovation. So, what have we learned from talking to our customers? We have a number of customers globally, in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, and New Zealand. We've learned from them the huge importance of the student experience. We've learned how giving students lots of information up top is really crucial to this working. In my view, a student guide, a video that shows the system in operation, a demo test that allows them to do it again and again and again and become familiar means that the person who needs to do it once can, and the person who needs to do it every night for 20 nights can keep trying out the system so that they are comfortable. We all remember how stressful assessments can be. And often the stress of assuming what's actually going to happen, what this new world will look like, is way worse than actually getting into it and using it. So that focus on the students is hugely important. It's also important from the context of you selecting a vendor. There's little things like, what's the ease with which the students get into the system? Do they log in once and it goes through? Do they click one button, or are they logging in several times? What does that student experience look like? When looking at this, it can be very easy to focus on what the administrative side looks like. But that student experience and seeing what your students will see is hugely important. I think the other part to it is making sure, where you can, to use just one platform. In the same way that you have one VLE, you don't have four. Using one platform so that your students know that no matter what assessment they're doing, they are doing it in one environment that they are now comfortable with. And we've seen this from a survey we've sent out to students at institutions who use Inspira, their change before and after taking an exam. They were pretty excited, before, or they're at least neutral to excited, but we saw an increase once they'd done it. And I would certainly say that part of that is from having familiarity and comfort, and then seeing as they got through it that it worked and it was fine. And I think from an institutional point of view, all of our institutions report very similar things. They've got an increase in efficiency in data because it's not things on paper that then have to be transposed onto another system. That data flow works from your various systems. It's work. It doesn't happen by magic, and it's not out of the box in many cases, because getting systems to talk to one another is something that takes time. But once you've got that, you've got a good data flow through. There are other points too, of course, the environmental aspect of this, not printing as much paper, not shipping it around the country or to multiple countries, and the fact that people can mark wherever they want and wherever they are once they learn how to use it. There's great savings to be made here. But I would still say that student experience, students being able to do assessments on a digital device, which is at the moment probably the only time we say to them, do something out of the ordinary. Learn in this digital way, live your life digitally, but at the moment we make you write on pen and paper for 3 hours. That student experience is as important, if not more important, than the institutional efficiency. And so, with that, I come to the end and hope that you are ready for the future of assessment and digital assessment in particular. And I'm going to conclude on this one slide, just going back to this point about a platform. A lot of what I've talked about today are things that you could put together using different tools. But I'm just going to leave that slide on the screen just for 10 seconds for you to look at it rather than me read it out to you. But there is, a reason for a platform, a reason why it all works together. So that is my whistle stop tour through how you can empower change in higher education beyond the pandemic. And I'll hand back to Alistair now, who I think has some questions for me to answer.
Brilliant. Yes, Tishan. So we're going to keep you on the spot and fire a few more questions at you. To take your point about the uptake of things like real world assessment, I was wondering, does something like this have the ability to enable greater interoperability and collaboration, not just between universities and professional bodies, but also between different types of institutions who are increasingly looking to serve a more diverse student cohort who will want different types of assessment, different types of qualifications?
Yeah, I think it really has a real advantage there. If we think about what is perhaps seen as the ultimate, which is that you could have an assessment where you could almost allow the student to decide what they did to demonstrate their knowledge and demonstrate the learning outcomes. If you've got this digitally, the ability to reframe it into different formats, to be able to say, here it is, you can write about it, or you can upload a video, or you can do, we've got different configurations of questions. That's the kind of thing that you can do digitally that would be far easier than trying to do it on paper and making it work on paper. And yes, there is, some of this will be hamstrung by regulation, by professional bodies, but yeah, there's great opportunity there. In the same reason that, or for the same reason that we know that if we get things right in the rest of our lives, if we put data in once, we can then hopefully repurpose it in so many different ways.
Right. We've had a couple of questions from the audience about best practice for dividing up student cohorts. I mean, I think perhaps this relates to the different type of assessments for different courses, but when you talk about taking a student-led approach, is almost allowing students to elect the type of assessment that they choose part of that, or does that fragment the course too much, do you think?
I don't think it does. I don't think it's possible everywhere, but I certainly think that our default has become to write, and it isn't. Let's not take anything away from it. It's a hugely important skill. But then, I mean, to bring in just a little bit, an anecdote from a friend of mine who's very senior at a bank in the UK, he said, we get really smart graduates, really, really top quality graduates each year who can write beautifully. But in my first training session with them, when I get them to stand up and deliver to one another, they can't. Um, or a number of them can't. They struggle. If we perhaps were able to move either to a more mixed diet where we get people to demonstrate their skills in different ways, and or we can use our assessments to say that you can do this in different ways, it doesn't just have to be a piece of written work, then yeah, I think that is how we can split cohorts. I think the other part of the sort of splitting cohorts point is the idea of, if you're thinking about large scale exams where you want to be able to do this in a way where you split them up so that they're not taking exams at the same time. Again, question banks, not doing exams that are susceptible to essentially being able to tell each other the answers. That requires development, but it can let you split your cohort up.
So fundamentally, one of the key functions of electronic assessment is about making sure that you've got a well-rounded skill set in addition to having well-rounded knowledge.
I think so. I think it helps drive it because it in and of itself requires, or can require, potentially different skills. But at the same time, I think it that only happens if you're doing the very pure learning and teaching innovation that exists. If you've got those people who are saying, well, hey, we now have different things we can use to get there. Let's use our knowledge to make sure that we get a more rounded skill set from our students. Then it'll happen. I wouldn't want to say, if you bought a platform and just uploaded some PDFs of your exams, you're going to increase that skill set. You're not. You need to work in a group to make sure you get there.
To that point, I mean, you talked about building a roadmap for integrating these solutions and perhaps starting with the faculty and building out smaller. Have there been particular disciplines that have been very early adopters of this kind of assessment?
Yeah, certainly for us, we found that law, business and management, medicine, those have been areas that have adopted first and quickest, and for various reasons. In some cases, it's because of regulatory reasons. So, the professional statutory regulatory bodies who last year across law and business certainly said if you want to assess your students, you're going to have to do it digitally and you're going to have to replicate what you had before. So, that's driven them. I also think that you have, with law, medicine, and business and management, where those exist as faculties within institutions, you've got large departments, large schools often with students at various levels, quite a mix of students, which means that not only are you increasing your rate of adoption, but you're also getting a good test bed for things that you might want to try in terms of innovation with those students to then work out how you deliver elsewhere. So that those are the three that we've seen. Four. I don't want to package business and management if anyone watching doesn't want me to. So three or four, however you look at it, that's normally where people start.
And one of the things we get asked a lot about our events is the support for educators in order to build the right courses that lend themselves to, well, digital transformation in particular, but for the sake of this discussion, digital assessment. The rates at which you've seen early adoption, has there been a correlation there in terms of people onboarding their staff and giving them the proper support and training that they need to take on new systems and new ways of working?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very clear with customers and prospective customers that that is a really important part of this working for you is onboarding the right people within the institution and onboarding them at the right level as well. Because the easy answer to this can be right. Let's get 100 people and teach them everything. Well, they almost certainly don't all need to know everything, and you probably don't need 100 people propagating it through a series of super users in the various areas, be it authoring or delivery of the exam or marking, and propagating that through the institution really means that people have the right level of knowledge at the right time. I think there's a second part to this, which is that of course, we have a help center and we have a service desk, but building up your own internal knowledge in a knowledge base is really important too. And having your own community is important. And what we really want to do is make sure that we can actually harness those communities together so that our customer communities can come together and collaborate with one another to exponentially improve that innovation that takes place.
And it's not just on the teaching and learning side of the administration that people need onboarding. There's obviously the administrators themselves and the people who manage the student life cycle. Is there value to be gained there from, as universities drive more towards a student-led approach, towards a data-heavy approach, to look at the feedback that they're getting from students in order to build out the right virtual assessments that are right for their particular cohorts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the student-led approach is equally important here. I would venture to suggest that talking to students, you will probably start with hearing lots of concerns, and rightly so, because they need to be assuaged. As I say, often they come from misconceptions, or they come from an aggregate of what they hear about digital assessment, some good, some bad. We've heard in the press over the last year when things go wrong. What they don't hear about is when things go right. So, yeah, you've got to deal with that first. But thereafter, hearing from them will, in the same way as teaching and learning, yield a much better assessment digitally that they're comfortable with and that you're comfortable with. So I would include them as partners from that early stage, including, dare I say it, as early as when you're thinking about who to partner with, getting them to look at the student experience, getting them to try an exam and tell you, from my point of view, this works, this doesn't.
And that actually leads on to another question I wanted to ask, which is, do you think onboarding students early in that process leads to a faster digital transformation overall?
Yeah, absolutely. I think onboarding them at that very, very early stage means that they are. It's not they feel like partners; they are partners in this, and they will have that mutual level of respect will grow and continue during the cycle and during the life of them as a student and the student body as a whole. but also just from a sheer nuts and bolts point of view, the earlier that they're involved, the better that they understand it, the more comfortable they're going to be on assessment day or in assessment week in using this and not thinking, not only am I concerned about performing to my best and knowing what I know, but how does this work?
And the other thing I wanted to ask about was that you mentioned obviously Inspira has many international partners, but primarily, you've built out from a European base over time. Are you seeing any particular trends as far as Europe goes for its digital assessment offerings?
The trends that we're seeing really are that people have realized that they need to do it now. What it is possibly changes, but I think that we were at the stage in across Europe where institutions are talking to us and indeed lots of vendors in this space about what we do, what we don't do, what we could do, what we might do. So I think everyone wants to implement something. I think that there's the differences are the speed of adoption and also what they want to adopt to. Some people are going to make this, as I say, part of an armory of options for their faculty and say, look, we've got Inspira, you can do all these assessments. Other people are going to say, well, we're going to start where we're regulated, where we have to do remote proctored exams. That's what we'll do, and we'll see how that goes. But I would suggest that across Europe, there is virtually no institution out there saying there's absolutely nothing digital for us at all. I just don't think that's the case.
And when we look at the different types of assessment that will be demanded by people who in particular need upskilling and reskilling over time. So I mean, this could be a traditional undergraduate cohort who, like you say, they get stereotyped as being digital natives, but they need certain digital skills teaching to them because they have more skills from a sort of consumer point of view rather than an active user point of view. We've seen the micro credentials become part of policy in Australia. We've had the nascent skills bill announced in the UK. How quickly do you think universities are going to have to respond in general, or are you across Europe in particular? Have you seen any real differentials in terms of how people are approaching micro credentials and lifelong learning?
I'd almost flip it on its head. I think the universities across Europe and potentially the world have been doing this forever. They probably just haven't been badging it. I'm glad everyone else is catching up, to be honest. Where are universities going to have to respond? Well, probably by badging what they've already done, which again is, as I say, they've been doing it. So yeah, I think there's probably scope for that. I think there's scope for whether this becomes institutions saying let's badge these things, it's really clear as part of what you do as part of a program, or whether that flips into something much closer to the idea of that those micro credentials driving people into university by them taking some courses and putting together a program that is more multidisciplinary based on what they might want out of it, which I think has its great advantages in allowing people flexibility. But at the same time, I always worry because I think that we've got across Europe and across the world absolutely first class educators who know how this works and know the advantages and disadvantages of micro credentials and allowing people an entirely blank page, choose your own adventure. So I think universities are really well placed to respond to this because they are the seats of learning and they know how this should work. And I hope that they are better included and involved in this great push, which plainly has benefits for everyone.
I mean, does that take us to the point, back to your earlier point about building a roadmap for this? If we look at who are the early adopters, be it law or medicine internally, and the voices from industry such as banking saying, well, we have graduates who are very highly skilled in one discipline but lack the required level in others. Are we moving to a point now where, much as we talk about greater internationalization and greater collaboration across borders, we can look at local integration and local industry to see, okay, well, who are the major employers for our graduates, and how can we work more closely with them to make sure that we have an assessment model that benefits our graduates but also benefits the local economy?
Absolutely. I think there's great potential for that across Europe. I also know that it goes on at the moment. If we think of the UK in particular, the apprenticeship programs, the apprenticeship levy, means that lots of employers are using their levy to upskill people through university programs. And if you look at the providers out there and you look at the businesses, there's often great tie ups between local companies and local universities. So I think it happens, and I think it will happen more and more in the UK. It'll happen across Europe too, because they by moving to something where you're being assessed digitally, you not only can have the conversation with local employers, but you're able to do it and say, well, we can do this. We can, if what you do when you take our graduates is make them write reports and then deliver a presentation, yeah, we can do that by way of assessment. And I think there's also, there's mutual respect for what each other does. University is not just something that takes you into a job. There is an entirely different area of learning or value to it as well. But the conversations that already happen were going to be augmented by having these digital tools. And I think in other areas, they'll be started by saying, hey, look, we can do this now. Let's talk about how we can do it together.
So I suppose what we're talking about really in some cases is a process of amplification, because like you say, there's already great examples of people doing this. They're just not calling it perhaps what the politicians want you to call it, or perhaps what the wider industry has settled upon and agreed upon term for it.
I think that's right. I think it's often just a case of labeling. If the parties got together around a table and talked about it, they'd realize that they're doing 80-90% of it already. But that discussion and then the availability of technology to just push it over to the 100%, that's the key part.
Great. We've got a couple of minutes left. There's one other topic I did want to ask about, which is really sort of the changing use of space on campus for assessments. So while we have all this interconnectivity through digital platforms is fantastic for many reasons, it doesn't solve what THE in its editorial coverage refers to as the problem of digital poverty, which is not only just access to devices, but access to the right spaces where you can teach and learn and also be assessed as part of that. So have you seen any innovative solutions or any thinking around changing use space on campus to help with different types of assessment?
Yeah, there certainly is. If you look at the landscape across Europe, there are universities who are making decisions that they might not have made before, or again, may have taken years. So looking at their spaces to ensure that those who do have devices can come in and have the appropriate space to use them, and that those who don't have a better, more reliable device. It is almost certainly better, if you understand your students and understand the numbers and what they do, to have, if that's what the research tells you, 20 high spec, well maintained computers in the library and 80 spaces for people to bring their own device, than 100 devices, which are costly, far more costly, 5 times more costly to maintain, um, 80 of which get pushed to one side as somebody brings their laptop in. You are going to have students who have great kit and just want space. You're going to have students who don't have great kit and therefore need yours. And why not spend your money wisely by having fewer devices that work better? And you can do this, in libraries, in teaching spaces across your institution, across the campus. But it really does require knowing your students in this particular context. I'm sure everyone listening, not breaching GDPR, but just in your own head, could tell me the diverse range of students you have based on a number of characteristics. But do you know how many of them own a computer and what it is and what operating system it's running and how old it is and what kind of camera it has? Probably not. Just as important. And I think that we drive this as well by thinking about things like minimum specifications that we tell our students that they know that they can have for their 2 or 3 year course, that you will stick to and that they can stick to. And that those who can't afford that, you can identify them early to work out what your intervention strategy is, either by providing them with a device on site or providing them with a device to use generally. But it requires that knowledge, and it requires a level of granularity that I suspect we're not at.
Okay, great. Well, it's nice to have something to aim for in future. That takes us up to time. Ishan, thank you very much for that overview. It was really informative.